This is the Etiology Podcast. I am your host, Elka Kubaku, licensed social worker and psychotherapist. In this podcast, we explore divisive issues around food, health, and body image with the goal of mending relationships within the eating disorder recovery professional community and creating a space where a multiplicity of perspectives can coexist harmoniously. This podcast is uncensored and encompasses a political and ideological spectrum. If you believe something you hear is harmful or misinformed, please be respectful to the speaker. And also, feel free to reach out about recording another episode on the same topic from your vantage point. My hope is that if, as professionals, we can hold each other's stories with respect and compassion, we'll be better able to do so for our clients. GLP-1s, such as Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro, are a class of medications originally developed to treat type 2 diabetes. More recently, they become a hot topic in the mainstream for their weight loss effects. A quick Google search brought up the following headlines. Weight loss is finally easy with a prescription to GLP-1 medication. Join 100,000 plus patients and transform your health, body, and life. A natural approach to medicine. Media and marketing promote these medications as the key to finally feeling at home in your body. Eating disorder recovery professionals, however, tend to be much more skeptical. Many have lived through countless fad diets and miracle weight loss drugs, none of which delivered on their promises, some of which did more harm than good. In this episode, Winter Groechl talks about how her perspective on GLP-1s has evolved. She shares her initial hesitation and how her stance became more nuanced and flexible as she observed both positive and negative client experiences. We also touch on the broader question of how we as professionals approach intentional weight loss, acknowledging the painful reality of weight discrimination while making space for clients who hold this as a goal. This conversation is about stepping away from dogmatic thinking and approaching clients with openness, a willingness to learn, and deep respect for the diversity of the human experience. Winter is a licensed professional counselor in Arizona dedicated to providing competent, compassionate care for individuals healing from substance use disorders, eating disorders, disordered eating, body image issues, depression, anxiety, trauma, and more. They have experience across all levels of care in Arizona's mental health system and draw from ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, mindfulness, DBT, CBT, polyvagal theory, compassion-focused therapy, and client-centered approaches. Winter practices from a social justice, weight-neutral, and inclusive lens. As a member and advocate of the LGBTQIA+ community, they are committed to creating an affirming safe space for people from all backgrounds. Their vision is to help each client explore their true self and connect with their capacity for growth, a restored sense of self, and lasting empowerment. Hi, Winter. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, nice to be here. Thanks for having me. Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do in the eating disorder, food, weight recovery world?
Yes. So I am a therapist over here in Arizona. I have found that my area that I've really enjoyed working with specifically is assisting humans who are navigating their journey with eating disorder recovery, disordered eating, body image, as well as trauma. I mainly work, a lot of my clients that I work with are in the LGBTQIA population. So that's kind of the main space that I really like working with.
Cool.
Yeah.
When we spoke last time, you had mentioned that your perspectives on GLP-1 started out one thing, have shifted in some way since then. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So I think the conversation around GLP-1 medications, I'm sure that you've kind of just like noticed how over the last, I would say 5 to 6 years within the eating disorder community specifically, has become quite a thing. And I think it's raised, as I would imagine, just lots of different emotions, reactions, personal perspectives. And so I think when I first started having my clients come to me who are navigating, considering taking these medications, maybe they already were taking these medications, I noticed kind of like my, first initial reactions. They showed up pretty pretty heavily, right? Of just, I think for me, I have my own history of navigating an eating disorder journey. And so I think like the first thing I noticed was like this protective part of me that showed up, not wanting them to continue to struggle with, maybe various issues or symptoms that could potentially be caused by this medication. And I think like the second piece that showed up for me was like, okay, I'm very much an intellectualizer. When I don't really know much about something, I'm like, let me research the crap out of this to kind of understand more of like what we're looking at, like what these medications are used for. So I can best know how to meet my clients in this conversation and not do any harm.
So you started out hearing about it, hesitation,
Yeah, immediate. Yeah.
immediate hesitation, in some ways related to your personal history. Can you tell me or give some more texture to what that hesitation was, what you were
Yeah.
afraid of, and where that came from?
Absolutely. So I think when I think about the history in America of different medications or interventions that have been kind of put onto the market or displayed to help with quote unquote weight loss, they tend to have a lot more maybe harm long term than helpfulness. And so I think in the history of looking at different diets, when we look at maybe again different medications like fen, those things created just like a lot of trauma for clients' bodies and just navigating that long term. So I think my initial hesitation was what is this going to look like long term? How could this potentially really significantly impact someone who maybe does have a history of disordered eating or eating disorder, is in recovery or doing well now and stable, and then implements this type of medication? Could that cause a relapse? Could that cause just other potential serious indicators that it's not great for all humans? Like, what are we actually looking at? Yeah.
Yeah. So the two concerns then were, does this have side effects that aren't being mentioned or are being downplayed or we don't really know about yet? And also, if somebody has an eating disorder, which is triggered by weight loss and food restriction, is losing this weight going to send them back?
Right, right. Yeah. Especially because I think, I would hope, and I'm sure you run into this as well. I would hope that medical providers or providers who are talking with clients, humans, about taking these medications have those informed consent conversations. I oftentimes have found, and this is not true to be of all medical providers, I will say that. However, in the history of me working with different individuals, it's maybe like 2% of medical providers who actually have those informed consent conversations and share like the wide array of potential side effects that we could see when taking these medications, especially if someone's taking it for the purpose of weight loss and not necessarily for support of type 2 diabetes or PCOS or something that, again, like we've seen more beneficial results around and with less side effect impacts. So I found that the informed consent conversation has really fallen on kind of the front loading of like dietitians who are in the eating disorder space and therapists who are in the eating disorder space to have some knowledge on that, because clients are just kind of being given these medications and not really told then potential risks versus rewards.
Yeah. You've seen clients who entered or started taking a weight loss medication with a lot of hopes about it and then were really harmed by it.
Yes. And I think the thing that really stands out to me in this conversation too, above like any of the like potential medical side effects, is like I've seen this just humongous presentation of shame coming up, and like someone coming to talk about this with providers, just like so scared that providers won't work with them anymore, that they're going to be judging them, right? Like, and just the shame of, I'm taking this medication and it's not working the quote unquote way that my provider said that it would. I'm not losing all of this weight. I'm still struggling. I'm still depressed. So I feel like I just quote unquote failed another thing that was supposed to, right, like really help me just kind of cure everything. So I think it's just like expectation too, that this thing is going to help everything. And then when they don't feel like they themselves are responding the way that they should, that they're just a failure again.
Yeah. So that's a third concern one we have. And GLP-1 does have almost this, the way that people talk about it, this like magic fix kind
Yes.
of feel to it.
Yep.
And the other concern there is that for some people, it may really help. And for others, it won't be everything that you've expected because that expectation was set so high.
Yes.
And then the danger is that you'll take that on yourself and be like, hey, what's wrong with me?
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. What is wrong with me that this intervention isn't working the way that it has been, described to?
Yeah. You started to reference some negative experience you've seen with clients, with yourself as well, in the
Yeah.
medication related or sort of related. Can you share some of that story with me?
Yeah, as far as like clients who have had like negative side effects, or what in particular are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you have your own personal experience of trying or hoping for the fix
Mhm.
and what was told to you, what that was like for you when you had this reaction to the GLP-1s that was like don't run for that as quickly as you are. What was
Yeah.
behind that? What past experiences?
Yeah. I think, living in a society, right? Like I am very privileged in that I have not um navigated the world in a body where GLP-1 was something that I went to my doctors to talk about, a skin issue I was having. And then somehow we wound up on this topic of, oh, you came in here to talk about skin. Let's now talk about weight loss or why your weight is impacting your skin. I'm very privileged in that I have not had this weight stigma, weight shaming experience in most of the like medical settings that I have encountered. Right. And so I think it's recognizing that then humans who, again, are navigating the world, who maybe are in larger bodies, that can be like the constant thing that they're navigating. They go in to talk about this unrelated thing, and now they're being asked about their diet and weight loss plan. And still, we all live in a world where I think, like, especially right now in the media, or, you look anywhere as far as social media or different, I was watching the Super Bowl and there was an ad for Ozempic where it's just kind of like projected everywhere as to be like this miracle drug. And I think that's, really smart on marketing's part. I think we're also constantly provided these messages that operate off of that comparison piece of like, if there's anything in everything that you don't like about yourself, there's something that can quote unquote fix that. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of buying into, right, like that we're never allowed to just exist
To
authentically.
just
Like
be,
we always
yeah.
have to be improving ourselves in some way. And I think the heavily conditioned world that we live in around that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you haven't had the specific experience of like a lot of the fat phobia or your weight is a problem, you need to lose it.
Yep.
And some of what you have had as someone who's recovered, I imagine, is that I need to change myself to become something else.
Absolutely, right. I'd like to be able to, fit in or go with the status quo, or just like the really subtle ways that I think we're constantly conditioned to believe that this is what you should be doing or this is what you should be focused on. And if you're not, then that's really bizarre and something's wrong with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you comfortable sharing some of your eating disorder recovery story and what that was like for you? How those
Absolutely.
messages registered for you
Yeah.
specifically?
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. So I was diagnosed with an eating disorder when I was 12, and I'm old now, so that was a really long time ago. Treatment looked very different, very differently back then. And again, I was really privileged that, I navigated that. It was back and forth, up and down, trying to do the best that I could from 12 till I entered residential treatment at 19. Was kind of like gently forced by my father to go into
Yeah.
residential treatment, and it is very interesting navigating the support of those recovering from an eating disorder or disordered eating now in 2025 versus when I was in residential treatment, and just seeing now how I think the way that we navigate, helping support someone healing through that was pretty different than when I was, receiving treatment. It saved my life at that time, but I think a lot of the healing that I've done was post residential treatment. Just because I think, again, it kind of is like, this is the way that we're going to do this. And there was really no openness then to, gender identity, trauma history, neurodivergent presentation, and how our brains access information. There was no one there in residential treatment with me who struggled with binge eating disorder, which we know is the number one most, common eating disorder. So I think it was really eye-opening to me just how, again, like the stigma or like the schema that we have around what an eating disorder looks like, and how that it could not be like further from reality.
Yeah. To what extent was the picture of what an eating disorder looks like in the residential treatment you were at in line with what you were experiencing versus different?
Yeah, I think for me, like, again, at 19, will say that I was like a very, again, privileged, naive human that, like, I think people thought that, like, I was, that I was right, like I was the schema or stereotype of what eating disorders looks like. And so when I encountered then the different experiences of, right, like there are people of all different gender representations that struggle, all different cultural backgrounds that struggle, and different ages, right? Like it's not just like, me at 19, it doesn't just like go away magically when you're 60, right? Like I've navigated
Yeah.
someone, struggling with an eating disorder at all different ages, and the reoccurrence, right? As we navigate, entering into like later in life, how it can also reoccur. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you look back at your residential experience, at the time it was helpful for you, and now it's more so that having worked with other people who are maybe different from you, that you look back at that experience and see where there might have been gaps, if not for you, for others.
Yeah. Massive gaps. Yeah.
Yeah.
We still see, I think it's still a fight to be able to like to find, the most helpful treatment for people, where like the way that we treat eating disorders is, again, kind of missing all of those pieces that people really need help and support around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's more I want to ask you about there. Let me return to GLP-1s for a minute, though. So you started out with hesitation, started doing research on it, and then what happened?
Yeah. So it's been a really interesting, I think just broadening experience for me, where I think, again, like I tend to have just kind of a black and white viewpoint sometimes of information, and being able to look at the areas in which these medications can actually be a tool for humans that, again, they're using this in a way that's combined with, they are working maybe with an eating disorder dietitian or therapist, right? They are making sure they're really mindful of working on maybe their own internalized fat phobia or weight stigma or trauma that, that again, like this tool helps them kind of access in a way that at first I was like, there's just like no way that that could be possible or helpful. And I was luckily proven really wrong, where I've had, people that I have known in my own individual lived experience, but also clients, colleagues who are navigating this space, seeing how it has been a helpful tool, and being able to have, again, those informed consent conversations. And how do we make sure that this tool is helpful for you and not something that could potentially be harmful?
Yeah. I really appreciate that, and I've seen that as well. And it does feel like us, like so many of us, myself included, are recovered from eating disorders ourselves. And like you, I don't have as much, or I don't have that experience of like really being shamed for my weight in small instances, but definitely not like, and be, it feels like because the weight shaming and all of that has been so extreme and so painful, when we as eating disorder providers hear anything that resembles it, it's so easy to go to like, don't go there. We've been there. It's
Yep.
so painful. Don't do it.
Yep.
And at the same time, I've also heard from people who were like, I don't know if I can admit this in the eating disorder recovery field, but this has really helped me. And like, weight shaming is not okay. And also, like, this helped to quiet the food noise and that constant battle I've been having with myself. I've heard that from people.
Yeah. Yep. I think that has, right. It's been a tool to help people be able to actually access intuitive eating principles, right? Whereas before it was like, I know, right? It's like when we find the correct maybe antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication, we can know all these tools and we can, right, like logically know how to implement these interventions. And when maybe we aren't able to kind of connect all those dots with chemistry, brain chemistry, metabolically, whatever it is, it can be so challenging to kind of be able to implement those tools. So I've heard clients say, like, I feel like I can really now slow down and connect with my body for the first time. I feel like this helped me to be able to like access, joyful movement in a way that I haven't been able to before. There's also, some research that's looking at how potentially like a GLP-1 medication helps those who are navigating eating disorder, disordered eating history, reduce like their nicotine, alcohol use. Awesome.
Yeah.
Like there's just different pieces that maybe we see, the medications being supportive as a tool. Again, not an end all be all, but something that can kind of help people be able to work with their team and really feel like this is the first time I feel like I've actually made progress on this piece.
Yeah.
Yep.
You've seen some breakthrough moments.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just again, kind of, I think, um, again, kind of just being able to, like you said, be able to feel more connected to their body, whereas they're not just in that like constant fight flight. Yeah.
Yeah. We have the marketing industry on one side. This is the magic fix. And then we have eating disorder providers on the other side who are often like, this is bad. Don't
Yes.
do it. We've
Yep.
seen weight loss medications before. And then we have the reality of the people we work with that
Mm.
falls anywhere on that continuum.
Mm. Yeah, like the trusting the lived experiences of the humans that we're supporting, right? Like I think so oftentimes our clients already are coming in from my experience, right? Like with this sense of I can't trust myself. I can't trust myself because of my eating disorder. I can't trust myself because of trauma. I can't trust myself, period. Like you're supposed to know the answers. Just tell me what to do. Right.
Yeah.
Like the beautiful part of when I truly think about the term autonomy, it's being able to make decisions for ourselves that are rooted in our values without coercion. And
Yeah.
I think there's so much sometimes coercion that just happens, like you said, in the marketing world of this magic pill and just take this and maybe doctors really pushing it without having those informed consent conversations. And so I really found it to be just a beautiful experience to give that autonomy and that choice back to the client and say, I trust that the good, bad, or ugly that comes up with like anything, whether it's a GLP-1
Yeah.
or, whatever, weight loss surgery, whatever, I trust that we're going to be able to navigate this together. That again, I have not lived your experience. And so it's that like I want to help you make those informed decisions for yourself. Here's what I know to be true about the research in GLP-1s currently. And there's also just going to be a lot of gaps that we are, not sure of quite yet because, kind of still newish. So as far as, support for just weight loss. So kind of just again, like helping them make
Yeah.
those decisions for themselves.
Yeah. I really like how you define though the agency without coercion. And I feel like that coercion can also show up in therapy spaces in more subtle ways that sound much more kind. And this comes up, and I'm still like figuring out how to navigate this myself as well, but it feels like this comes up a lot with health at every size, like because again, it's approach that was developed in response to so much pain and is so needed.
Mm,
And like I'm thinking about clients who come in and are like my weight is a problem. And a huge part of that is messages that they've been given societally. And sometimes I'll also hear people say, like, I know that I will feel better, or I would have felt better if I didn't eat that
mm,
bag of chips, or I have this medical condition, whatever it is, diabetes, high cholesterol, sleep apnea, things like that. And I've felt better when I weighed less. And it feels so tricky because it feels almost like navigating the space where on the one side, they might have medical providers who are like, yes, yes, lose the weight without acknowledging any of the eating disorder and all of the harm that that's caused in the past. And then on the other side is when they bring it to an eating disorder provider, oftentimes it feels like the response is sort of just like, oh, sorry, that's not an option.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, that's definitely been, I think, like what I've observed as well. And I think really encouraging just us as humans, providers, anyone to kind of just again like lean into the different parts of us that show up around this conversation, as well as really um exploring the nuance, right? That like I again it's looking at um how can we help humans connect to their body and trust their body while processing like the million onion layers of fat phobia and all of like the stigma and discrimination that's gone into, them constantly being shown these different messages around their body and why their body is wrong, while accessing then like how do I feel most connected and joyful in my body, and how can I come from a place of I want to live a long beautiful life, how can I move from that intention instead of I just want to take up less space. I want my body to be felt like, we can't come from like this place of self shame. Like it's not going to lead us anywhere great. But I think when we
Yeah.
come from this, like, I want to take care of this vessel. And how can I do that in a way that's supportive of me while trying to quiet all of the noise around how we should or shouldn't? I think that can be very empowering.
Yeah. Something that I feel lurking in the background a little bit. So as we're speaking, so I want to just put it in the open and share some of my feelings and hear yours is that in the eating disorder professional world, it feels, I want to say, almost very easy to be excommunicated
Mm.
for for the wrong, like having the wrong
Yeah.
canceled,
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
canceled,
Hmm.
for having the wrong perspectives. And it feels tricky to go into anything that in any way might condone intentional weight loss.
Mm.
And I want to be able to open space for like the experiences that we're having and seeing with clients who are wanting to intentionally lose weight, which is often how people come in, and also name if there is fear associated with that.
Yeah, right. I think you're spot on that. I think it's really beautiful to name, right, like the many different contributing factors biopsychosocially to, someone navigating their own relationship with their body. And that in the eating disorder space, I think like we're heavily, heavily encouraged to align with Hayes principles, and that's great, right? But with any sort of anything, right, it's like, again, where is there conversation and openness to the nuance that exists within human experience? That I know, for the work that we do, you being the incredible professional you are, every human that you're working with, you are meeting them individually where they're at. We don't just take one, right, like Band-Aid and slap it on everyone and hope that that cures this gushing wound. So I think
Yeah,
it really is recognizing that I think sometimes as humans, right, like because we tend to be more black or white, or we have really strong feelings around a certain area, that it's easy then when someone's providing an opposing or just again holding space for duality of a situation, that we feel really intense emotions, we feel yucky. And I think it's way easier to other humans or other providers, as we see happening constantly in the world, of like, you're right,
yeah,
I'm wrong, right? Or I'm right, you're wrong. And just kind of
yeah,
creating that disconnect instead of being able to sit down and be like, oh my gosh, tell me more about why, right? Like why you think this way or what you've seen helpful in working with your clients. Because I think sometimes there's a lack of understanding and our brain wants to fill in the blanks with our lived experience, right? If
for sure.
I've seen Hawaii, I'm going to be like, well, I don't know what Hawaii looks like, but I've seen Montana and it probably looks like that. Like, nope,
Yeah,
different, very different things. Yeah.
yeah, that's very much the danger. And I'm remembering there was a time, this is not actually work related, but there was a time I was a little bit like closer to my eating disorder recovery. Now it feels like I'm far enough away that I have a lot of emotional distance from it. But I was a little closer and I was also like newer in my relationship with my husband, and he had decided to go on keto. And and I was like, this is eating disorder behavior. Like the best way to eat is based on your body's natural hunger and
Yeah,
fullness
right.
signals. Like I've I've been with the rules and restrictions and I found my way back. I'm like, this is the way.
Yeah.
And we talked through it and he was like, you're not me. And
Mm,
like
like, dang
he
it.
did,
Yeah.
yeah. And he did keto and he felt better on it in some ways and dropped off of it eventually. Like it wasn't a long-term thing. And like it didn't spiral into anything massive.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't do it. I would never tell a client to go on keto. I wouldn't encourage it. And like for him, it just didn't mean the same thing as it did for
Mm.
me.
Right. Yeah. Right. Where we see again, like it's I think that like phenomenon of there's humans that again, there's so many different factors, whether it's genetic, biological, environmental, brain chemistry, right? Like the little things that create the perfect storm of someone having an eating disorder versus humans who can do the keto for 2 weeks or, they do the carnivore for whatever it is
Yeah.
that they want to do, and they don't necessarily spiral into, eating disorder patterns. And I think it's helpful, I think, to just talk through, any client who's going to be navigating any sort of change in dietary pieces, looking at what we know to be true about, right, just how weight loss can impact, right, like more obsessive thoughts about food, or
Yeah.
how I'm really lethargic, or I'm not getting all my nutrients and vitamins in, and I'm flagged for malnutrition. Talking about like the very real things that, again, we know to be true about weight loss and just again harm reduction around those are making sure that our body is protected in that journey. I also think
Yeah.
in the way that we are, as we know, right, like the best that we have is diets or, these things that like we're not taught how to take care of our bodies holistically without this nasty diet culture piece attached. So what would it be like for clients to be able to actually talk about nutrition and taking care of their bodies and whatever ends up happening, right? Whether that's weight loss or weight stability or muscle gain, or being able to approach it from that lens of, again, how to best support your body without it being on this side or the other, where we're only haze or we're only weight loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That moves from there's this one right vision of what health is, whether that's weight loss or that's haze, to we can really trust your body and your experience and work with exactly what that looks like for
Mhm.
you.
Yeah, and looking at, like you said, I think looking at what health means to them, because we are used to operating this healthism lens, constantly, where it's the new green powder or this green juice, or you go do red light therapy. Like, what about humans who don't have access to that? Who, right? Like, how do we actually talk about accessible, basic things that are helpful for their health? Because I think everyone's health is going to look completely different. And we're sold this idea that if you just try hard enough, that you too can be healthy and have the body of this person. And that's
Yeah.
inaccurate. There's so many different factors of what people have access to that make that entirely impossible.
Yeah. When we touch on the fear of being canceled and what it's like to speak like this in the eating disorder recovery field, you had mentioned before as clinicians how we have all these different parts of us that are showing up. Can you tell me a little bit about in this conversation right now, what parts of you are showing up?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I think there's a part of me that feels there's like my centered self that feels really honored to be able to talk to a like-minded human who understands from the work that you've done personally and professionally how important this is for us to name and acknowledge. There's also the other parts of me that are like, oh, someone's going to hear this and they're going to be like, oh, I'm not referring to winter anymore, right? And I honor that part and recognize that like that is very much a real thing that we navigate. There's also like
Yeah,
little rebellious teenager part of me that's like, sure, don't
totally.
hurt me anymore, go for it, right? And then there's that like wounded part of me that's like, that's a bummer. Like that's how the world operates, is that you hear one piece of information from someone or one side of something, and it's sad that we just kind of make that decision off of that one conversation or that one thing that we see someone post on social media or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like I know I have that fear. It comes up less actually as I'm talking now. And maybe like in some ways I feel like I've been pretty lucky in and I don't know if it's just the selective like the type of people who I interact with, but I feel like when I look at the world through the lens of social media and Facebook groups and conversations, I'm like, people are so intolerant. Everybody hates each other.
Yeah.
And then when I actually talk to people, I'm like, people are awesome and
Yeah.
so capable of holding different realities. So I don't like in this particular instance, I feel maybe overconfident, maybe justifiably confident, but I feel like people can hold it
Mm.
and it'll resonate with a lot of people. I know I have, like, definitely other areas where I'm like it feels like relationships, especially professional relationships, are so fragile,
Mm.
and, like, I definitely have that fear where I'm like, if I'm gonna say something wrong at some point, like, something not just wrong, but, like, fundamentally intolerable, and that's gonna be the end of this.
Yeah. Yeah. I could not agree more. I feel very privileged and grateful to have, and I don't know whether that's just, over the years, values clarification of, different professional personal relationships that I think a lot of my growth around this topic has been because of these incredible professionals who have shared with me their experiences, challenged me maybe on some of like my, thoughts and ideas that were old and needed some updating, held space
Yeah,
for me as I kind of wrestled with the many, many different parts of me that have showed up in all of those conversations, who have sent me articles, resources, right? Like I feel very, very grateful that I think growth can't happen in a vacuum. So how do we expect one another to learn new skills and what's coming out in the world, like if we're doing that independently? Like we need one another. And I think sometimes like the most challenging conversations I have with other humans tend to be the ones that have helped me grow the most.
yeah,
I can't grow just like being like, this is fine. I'm just going to stay over here where I feel comfy.
for sure, yeah. Can you tell me about with the GLP-1s, where you had started off with a much harder stance and had shifted to one that was a little more flexible? Can you identify some of the moments where that started to shift and what that was
Yeah.
like for you?
Yep, I think a lot for me has been sitting in the rooms with my clients and hearing their lived experience, their truth. Again, talking through with them the good, bad, and ugly that they've navigated. I think a lot of those shifting moments have also been hearing from my colleagues in consultation spaces how these medications have been, again, a really big tool. Listening to different trainings, right, from different lenses, maybe not just, the eating disorder space, talking about GLP-1 medications, but also maybe psychiatric presentations on GLP-1 medications and hearing again the potential help for, again, alcohol reduction, nicotine reduction. And again, like hearing different people in my own personal life and their experience on it, where I was like, initially I was like, oh, okay, they're taking this. I'm going to just sit here and see how I feel. And again, trusting and honoring that, like, I'm here to hear about your experience with this. I'm going to really watch that I'm not going to accidentally give off this feeling or this vibe that, like, oh no, I don't trust that you can navigate this. Right. And just really
Yeah,
really being open, and also not the moments or the people in my life who have taken it and had really negative experience with it, not allowing that to be my right, like confirmation bias of like, oh, see, it's bad, it's all bad. Right, of like
yeah,
mindful that, like, again, there's such mixed experiences that, really trying my best to look at all these experiences and help me kind of take the different pieces from them and not just um, selectively pick and choose what helped me learn.
yeah. So you were aware of like the absoluteness of your position in the beginning and aware that like this may or may not be justified and willing to approach it agnostically and see where that went.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a really great way of putting that, right? Of like, I think with anything, right? Like when it comes down to it, my clients and their autonomy and choice is so much more important to me than just like my own, discomfort around. Like it's my job to kind of lean into like, why is this giving me discomfort, and to kind of sift through that. And it's
Yeah.
been a fun journey of kind of sifting through the many different variables as to these
Mhm.
medications and what they represent, and not only what they represent, but how they can be, tools if used in that um, in that space appropriately.
Yeah, like if we can only combine the marketing and this, I'm bringing my husband in a lot, I guess, because I was just kind of talking to him about related stuff, but like it feels like the medical world, or maybe like the medication marketing world for sure, is like try something new, go for it, do it. And there's a life in that. Like there's an energy in that, an energy toward change. And I feel like I'm maybe a little more representative of the therapy world, though obviously there's tons of variation within that as well, but much more hesitant, much more like, can we look at what might go wrong with this before we jump in head first? And if we can just take both of those, then we have that novelty and the space for change, and also the ability to look at some of the very real concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's again like our responsibility. It's going to kind of fall on us because I just don't see this happening very much in, like you said, in the marketing space specifically. But we're not going to see a lot of like, this is what to look out for. This is what to, do if you're noticing these symptoms, whatever. So it kind of falls in on us to not be the like kind of bad guys of like, well, I'm just going to play devil's advocate of, right, but like do it from a space of like, I care about your life, right, like your well-being, because like you said, sometimes I think just everyone's individual experiences kind of falls through the cracks when we just look at like these big
Yeah.
diagnoses, right?
Yeah. The acceptable and unacceptable story.
Yeah, oh goodness, yeah, what's shown and what's not shown, and the representation around whose success stories, quote unquote, are shown and not shown. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you were doing that work of, I feel very apprehensive about this. I'm looking at myself and what parts of me are showing up. Tell me a little bit more about what you discovered about yourself when you were looking inside.
Yeah, I think, no matter how long it has been for me in my own like personal recovery journey, I recognize that there's always going to be this little spidey sense that goes off for me, whether I'm right. Like I noticed this I was just talking to a friend, like I was getting my nails done, and this woman was talking about her cleanse she was doing, right? And immediately my little spidey sense, and I'm like, oh, checking in, what's coming up for me, right? Like I don't think that any amount of time that I've had on this earth, like I will go to my grave, which is that like spidey sense of like, you good? You good? Like, are you okay? Right? Like it's just something
Yeah.
innately in me that like, because this has been something that has been a part of my journey, right? Like when I hear that, there's just immediate parts of fear, right? Like I have a perceived threat around, people doing weird things with, food or body. And I have
Really?
to honor that that's going to be something that comes up. And like you said perfectly, someone engaging in a cleanse or going on keto, that may actually not be a threat for them. And just because it's a perceived threat for me, right? Like a threat for my nervous system response to hear about those things. Like I have to trust again that they're going to navigate that. And if they start feeling weird, that they're going to find support to help them through that. And there's something that my nervous system can do for this poor woman who, what, right? Like it's just like, quiet girl, go do something else, go chill. Like you don't need to
Right.
now, right? Because those parts of me are going to come up, and I recognize it's coming from a good place, but like she doesn't have to take that on anymore. Yeah.
Right. And maybe she's not actually a poor woman.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like maybe she's living her best life. Like maybe that's the best thing for her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who am I to say? Yeah.
Can you describe that spidey sense to me? The thoughts, sensations, memories.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that part of me is just, it's funny. And obviously there, that pops up with different things in my life as well. But I think this the conversation around um It can be something as minor as, exercise discussion, or again, like things with food or body image, people saying, oh my gosh, I'm just really struggling with dot 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 about my body right now. I notice that part comes up, and I still am trying to kind of identify what exactly it is, but I think again it's just like immediate, I guess, like worry or concern because of my lived experience, that when those thoughts were coming up or I was kind of talking about those things, I was really unwell. I was not in a good place. And I think this other part, I recognize that it's so connective for humans to talk about. I think it's more connective for us as humans to talk about, like, oh gosh, I just really don't like this part of myself for some reason, right, than it is to talk about our successes or the things that we like about ourselves. Or like, I think it's a very socially acceptable thing to be like, like on Mean Girls, where they're sitting in front of the mirror and they're like, oh my gosh, my nail beds, oh my gosh, my whatever. And it's that moment where we're like, oh, that's not really like normal. That's sad that that's how we kind of connect. Yeah.
Yeah. So the memories and feeling it's bringing up for you is just being very like hyper self-critical, and you're not alone in that.
Right, right.
And also a time when you were really deep in an eating disorder.
Yeah. Yeah, or again, just like struggling, and even before that, you know what I mean? It's just like, I think for me, it's I want to be the like little evangelical part of me, right? Like that is no longer with me, like she's gone, but like it's almost like I want to be, when you find recovery or find what works for you, like you did with husband, right? You want to be like, this is the only way, and I have to be like, whoa, girl, we ain't doing that no more. Like,
What's the evangelical part of you?
yeah. I grew up in a very shockingly, right? I grew up in a very heavily religious household. Um, Parents had very, extensive religious background. And so I was very much raised in, going to church, spending a lot of time in the church, and navigating just my own relationship with religion and how that played a role in my eating disorder. And being able to now recognize, right, like that sometimes again it kind of feels like when I want to get all preachy about, intuitive eating or recovery or whatever, I have to be like,
Yeah.
that's not your job to save everyone from that, because what if they don't need saving? Yeah.
Yeah. Even taught to have a cause and to share it.
Oh my gosh. Especially, I think, early on in my recovery journey, it was very much like reflected to me of like, well, you survived this. Like, you need to use this for
To
good.
share it with other people. Yeah.
Yeah. So really learning, right? Like honoring that does not have to be the reason now why, I am so passionate about this field, and finding motivation and energy from a different space instead of it being from this space of I owe this to this higher power. I owe this to other people. I just navigated that survivor's guilt for so long that it was like, oh, that's not healthy for anybody. Yeah.
Yeah. And it gives meaning in some way.
Absolutely. Yep. Right. Finding that purpose and meaning, but it not coming from like this really like shame-filled place. Yeah.
Yeah. And also coming with, when you describe it now, it comes with so much more respect
Yes.
for other people's stories, much less of a saving and much more of a, I can be with you
Yep.
in this.
Yep. And then I'm going to honor and respect your lived experience more so than what I think your experience should be to heal. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you give more texture? And I know this is a little bit of a sticky topic, so share whatever you feel okay with. But when you say when I was in that space of cleanses, diets, all that stuff, I was really unwell. Can you give a little more texture to what unwell was?
Yeah. I think for me it was just navigating, when I think about like the whole that is navigating an eating disorder, it's just like every day, all day, constant. Like that's just, your life is so small because that's all you're navigating. And so I think of a time where there was just so much going on that was the little life raft that I had. I didn't know any other coping skill at that time other than eating disorder, right? Like that provided me that consistency, that constancy, right, like it created structure for my brain to just like hold on to for dear life. And within that, right, like there was so much disconnection, so much isolation, just so much like denial of like, this is totally fine. This is just how everyone lives their life. And,
Yeah.
you know, it took humans being willing enough to be like, I will chance you never speaking to me again to tell you that I'm really worried or you need to go to treatment or yeah. So
Yeah.
I think of it's kind of just like your own little version of your own little hell of,
Sure.
it's a very small world. Yeah.
Yeah. Like a time when your life was so occupied with, was it
Yeah.
food restriction, purging, binging, that
Yeah.
the whole cycle. And it feels like that becomes like just the way to live. There's not space
Right.
for you.
No, there was no, I could not imagine a life outside of that. Right, it was like the pain that right? Like, and it's just like, again, our nervous system chooses that safety over the safety or like the potential betterment, right? But that feels really scary because we don't know what that looks like. So it was like, this is the hell that I know, so I'll just stick with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was just so reinforced in so many areas of my life where it was just like, okay, like it was just that's just truly how life is. And so I was like, this is just what you do.
Yeah. Mm. So you've shared some of where you've seen the GLP-1s be harmful to people. Can you tell me a little more about that? So we've gotten into more of where you've seen it being beneficial,
Yeah.
but some of what you've seen with clients who entered with this will help me, and it maybe triggered things that could have been avoided.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's just important to note that with like GLP-1s, obviously the things that I assess for as an eating disorder therapist, we can see with GLP use, right? So someone is using this medication and they're having, again, extreme nausea, vomiting, they're having gastroparesis, so slowing down of their intestinal system, which we're already going to see in eating disorders. Their bowels are not working properly just because, again, everything's slowed down. We can see muscle wasting if we're not ensuring that while using this medication, we're having adequate protein intake. We see malnutrition because we're not eating enough. So we're not getting enough vitamins that we need to sustain. There's also research that looks at a potential, not again, this is just correlation, but I have had clients who have navigated increased depression or increased suicidality while taking this. And also because of the slowered absorption of things, medications that they may be taking can be impacted as well. So that's just something to think about in talking to your
Mhm.
psychiatrist. If you're going to be taking these medications, are there certain medications I'm taking that the absorption is going to be um, less efficacious because of the absorption
Mhm.
rate? Yeah.
Yeah. What has the process looked like of coming out of that? Meaning, when a client started taking these medications, let's say you're seeing those symptoms of malnourishment, and they're feeling them, they're not feeling good physically. What happens next, or what did coming out of that look like?
Yeah, um I think there's like the immediate tear that if I stop this, what's going to happen with all just the fear mongering around how your body's going to do XYZ immediately. And so I think there's just like a lot of apprehension in, right? Like I will just bear through these side effects or feeling shitty instead of, right? Like thinking about or considering stopping using it. There are people who, right, like do decide, like, I'm going to stop these pieces. And it's just helping them through that adjustment period of we don't know, right? Like, just like we didn't know what symptoms you were going to have taking it, like, your body may respond completely okay stopping that medication too. And just having supports around that to navigate. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. What, if at all, has been your communication like with medical providers?
Yeah, so we have a few, right? Like we have a few out here in Arizona, as far as medical providers who have an understanding and specific training in working with those who are navigating eating disorders. And I feel like the communication has, with the ones I'm thinking of specifically, has been helpful to kind of talk about, they are having those informed consent conversations with clients, and they are talking to the team before maybe talking with the client about taking this. So that's really helpful to all kind of be on the same page. I think the
Yeah.
challenging thing that I've seen is when medical providers prescribe this without talking to the outpatient team, and then you're kind of put in this like tough position of the client being like, well, doctor said I could take it. And we're kind of like, cool, 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 cool. Would have been nice to kind of have that conversation all together, to help you feel like, you're informed about that. So really trying hard not to like split team dynamics, right? But also like honor that like when we can communicate about these things, it's really helpful so that we can all just be on the same page. And again, my intellectual brain can know why you're sharing this person would be a good candidate for this.
And have there ever been conversations where, let's say, a doctor prescribed something, or prescribed GLP-1s in this case, it went badly, and then, like, you or client communicated that to them, and there was some kind of follow-up? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, I think the challenging thing for me is when I think about the different clients that I've, right? Because the hope is that, I really encourage them, if you notice XYZ symptom wise, reflect that to medical provider, right? Be communicate to medical provider. I think the hard thing is that, again, privilege. When I go into my doctor and I'm saying, hey, this medicine that I'm noticing is doing XYZ, they're like, great, okay, fine, we'll switch you. When people of different cultural backgrounds, in larger bodies go to their medical provider and say, this is what's going on, they don't get that reaction where they're maybe deemed non-compliant. They are just told to like, well, just try taking it with some extra water, right? Like they're very dismissed. So
Yeah.
it's really challenging in that it's been my experience that even when clients do try to share their really, really valid concerns about, I don't want to take this medication or this medication makes me feel this way, that at times it's just like really dismissed. And that can be incredibly challenging when I'm really hoping that like that medical provider is going to be like, great, let's have a conversation around this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's helping my client know how to navigate that. Uh,
Mhm.
so being like the space that like reminding them that that's not okay. And if we need to find, again, maybe I'm the space
Mhm.
that just like, again, reminds them that they're valid because it's just really hard
Yeah.
that sometimes they're met with that.
Yeah, and that this is your doctor, it's not you.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And again, reminding them that most MDs aren't going to have specific training on eating disorders or what to look for or assess for.
Yeah.
So that it's like you said, it's just the knowledge gap here and not you personally.
Mhm. Yeah. I would love to start facilitating. I don't know how this would happen, but conversations between therapists and medical providers. I feel like that's such an important collaboration and one that so often goes wrong.
Mm, I could not agree more. And like, shout out to I know a few MDs out here who, one in particular I'm thinking of, created curriculum for, to soon become doctors to take in
Mhm.
their courses that talks about eating
That's
disorders.
awesome.
I'm like,
Yeah.
heck, yeah, makes me so,
Mhm.
yeah. So there are some
Yeah.
doing the Lord's work out there who are creating
The Lord's work.
we're creating content to like so that this can start to be we can start to bridge that knowledge gap. Yeah.
Yeah. What have you seen in the intentional weight loss conversation as it relates to GLP-1s? Because that feels like one of the more difficult parts to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think again, like my initial response was like, oh, well, if you have type 2 diabetes, you're allowed to take that, right? Like, and I was like, wow,
Yeah.
okay. So in your brain winter, you're saying that there's humans who have biopsychosocial elements that have created this perfect storm of type 2 diabetes and that they're allowed to take that. But other humans who are navigating different physical symptoms, they're not allowed to take
Mhm.
that because they don't have time. And I had to really check myself.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't make sense, girlfriend. So we're like having that honest reflection myself. And I think thinking about again, you know, I think when we only focus on one data point with anything, it can really feel again, like that black or white of like, if I'm not making success just from what the scale is saying, that I'm failing. And so I think
Mhm.
looking at, again, with clients, I know that you really want to focus on this one data point of weight loss because that's how we've been conditioned in society to. And I'm not saying that we can't because I really want to normalize,
Mhm.
destigmatize, right? Like habituate to this number and talk through it while also holding space for like all the other things
Mhm.
that will help us attune to how do you feel good in your body? What does health look like for
Mhm.
you? Not for me,
Yeah.
not for this person, right? Like the celebrity, but like what does it look
Mhm.
like for you? What do you want to see, being the indicators that you're feeling better if you decide to start taking this medication?
Yeah. So you can acknowledge maybe weight loss will feel better for you, or maybe it has felt better for you. And what does that feeling better actually mean for you? And can we take it beyond that number to like, was it this particular way you were eating? Was it the movement? Like, what was it beyond just that number?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Because I think out because of the way that our brains are conditioned, right? Like I think about, good old Pavlov's dog, right? Like we are conditioned that when we see the number drop, like the little bell goes off and we're like, ah, yes, I am a better human because of
Mhm.
this, right? Like
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking to me because I think, again, it's really helping notice that that's the association, understandable, because we've been conditioned our whole life to navigate that conversation most times, right? When we're talking about eating disorders. And like, what would it be like to start to find other ways that we're like, that's not the only association. What do we want our relationship with food, movement, ourselves, our body, right? Like, what do we want that to look like without that being the only association of like, ah, yes, I'm doing good because this number dropped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That feels like an opening rather than a shutting down. Whereas like when we make it intentional weight loss is unacceptable. Don't talk about it. I won't go there. That
Yes.
closes off. Whereas when we're like, okay, like you want this and that's valid. And we can work with that and let's go deeper into what that means for you.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think knowing how much shame is related to weight stigma, weight trauma, fat phobia already, I think the more that we can have transparent, honest, right? Like I have had plenty of conversations with clients where I've been like, oof, I'm feeling weird about this, or I'm noticing some discomfort in my body about what was blah, 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 blah. That transparency, that not shaming, that just like openness, like you said, it just creates like how can we work together instead of I'm not going to touch this, right? Like that's not
Yeah.
something that you should want. Again, it's like further closing them off from that ability to like talk through something that I think is going to be really important to address.
Yeah. And I'm thinking back to, I haven't thought about this in a long time, to my own when I was in eating disorder recovery and I had binge eating disorder. So I thought of my problem much more as overeating and I had gained weight from it for whatever that means. And and I never admitted that I had been on a diet. Like, because I was like, that's so shallow. Like, I don't like care that much. And maybe this was also my religious upbringing. I'm from an Orthodox Jewish background, still there in many ways. But, and there was this moment I remember writing in my journal, like, I actually think about my weight every single day. And like just acknowledging that, and it's not a right or wrong or good or bad, it's just here and it's a part of you to work with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so oftentimes, when clients maybe like share something for the first time that they're like, this is not something I've ever told them, right? Like whatever the thing is that like our little protective self does not want to come out, right? It's like, yeah, thinking about your weight or food all day, every day, I would be shocked. I've never met someone, right? Like being able to
Mhm.
normalize that, like, I know that feels really scary for you to say out loud, but like, I expect that, right? Because I think
Yeah.
what we knew about, especially, goodness gracious, what we've known about eating disorders, the different diagnoses of eating disorders, again, 10, 20 years ago. Luckily, we've come a little further, right? Of acknowledging so many, I think even now, so many of the DSM diagnostic criteria people are experiencing so much more nuance within that than just this little diagnosis could provide. So
For sure.
honoring the shame just in that, right? Like, well, I don't have this type of eating disorder. I'm not struggling enough, or I'm not sick enough because I don't meet
Yeah.
this, right? The scheme.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. As we wrap up, what do you want to leave our listeners with, or what's like the edited after you've seen what you see in the edited version of what you want people, providers, and clients to know about GLP-1s?
Yeah. I think just first and foremost, like acknowledging that there's just, again, it's like this new thing that there's so much conversation, so much information, so much, there's a little spotlight on it right now. And so, yeah, honoring that if you have a lot of different emotions, um, there's just a lot of confusion or hesitation or anxiety around this topic for whatever reason, whether you're just a listener or provider. I just really want to honor that and name that. And I think just taking a little bit of time to kind of think about what comes up for me around this topic and being really gentle with those little parts of us that show up because they're there for a reason. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that second part is this invitation of if I step outside of myself, right? Like how can I have openness to different people's lived experiences and how they may have differing experiences with, this with this tool. While also again doing our due diligence to talk about the good, bad, and ugly when it comes to these things. So I think again, just like the invitation for openness. I'm a nerd, so always learning more. I think the best piece that I've read on this was it's called Magic Pill by Johann Hani, or I don't remember his last name specifically, but I'll send it to you. He's a journalist
Yeah.
who wrote about not only his own lived experience, but like just interviewed so many different individuals as far as GLP-1 medication. He goes into all of, again, the good, bad, and ugly, different diet crap in the past. Like he's just an excellent job. And I found it really profound and just kind of my own learning journey around that. So I think having resources, having community around you to just navigate this conversation,
Yeah.
and not being scared of being canceled or excommunicate, right? Like finding your people to talk about this with.
Yeah. Send me a link to that and I'll link it in the show
Yeah,
notes.
absolutely. Yeah.
Where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me. I'm at Eating Disorder Revealed. Our website is Eating Disorder Revealed. So I am always available for consultation, just chatting about things, whatever might come up for humans that they want, more resources on. That's my weird special interest is I need a resource on this and I'm on it. So
You're the researcher.
yes, that is research. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Very cool. Thanks so much, Winter.
yeah. Thank you.